As you guys know, I recently had my son. He was born on May 17th and he is officially a month old. He's actually 6 weeks old tomorrow, which is insane. Time really does fly by really fast. My pregnancy also flew by really fast. Like everything is just like, it's like I feel like I just found out that I was pregnant and now my son is like right here. And then once your baby's here, you are running on 0% battery life 24/7. So everything goes by even quicker and you're just trying to grasp and hang on to all the moments. I haven't done like a story time thing in like so long that I'm like, this is just not natural. I've wanted to do this birth story for a while, but I've been really nervous too because I'm gonna cry. And looking back on everything that happened, it's traumatic. It was so different than what I had ever thought. Like I thought I had thought about everything that could happen, everything that could go wrong. I didn't prepare myself for what ended up happening, and it was so confusing and it was a whirlwind. It's really hard to look back on, but I want to do this video because other people have gone through stuff like this too, and honestly, it would be really nice to have comments from people who understand, because currently there's nobody in my life that does. There were even some people that I was telling about what happened and their responses were so empty about the situation that it made me just feel like they really don't understand what, and I don't blame them because how could you? Like I genuinely don't blame them. But if you've never gone through something like this or known somebody who's gone through something like this, you don't know how traumatic it is. I don't know if I'll ever fully heal from what happened. Maybe it won't get as painful to talk about eventually, but it's been 6 weeks almost and it still hurts me so bad to think about, and I'm gonna cry in this video. That's just what's gonna happen. I'm gonna do an entire video about a C-section because that's what I ended up having. The whole time I was told that my son was gonna be really big. My whole pregnancy went really well. Like there wasn't really any issues. The biggest issue, no pun intended, was that my son was measuring big from the very beginning. So one of the pros to that was that I got a lot of extra ultrasounds that I wouldn't have gotten had he not been measuring so big. It was a concern that they had. And then I failed my first glucose test, which was to see if I had gestational diabetes, which I passed my second one, so I did not have that. But there was just a lot of concern about his size. I thought it was just like a genetic thing because my mom had really big babies. I kept having all these ultrasounds. I saw so many different ultrasound texts. I just thought, oh, my son's gonna be really big. Didn't really have a birth plan. Apart from that was that I wanted an epidural and I wanted to push him out of my vajayjay. That was basically it. But towards the end of my pregnancy, I started getting suggestions from some of the ultrasound techs that I may potentially not have to have a C-section, but that it may be heavily suggested that I do it. And obviously it was my choice either way. With him measuring as big as he was, like he was in the greater than 99th percentile, his head was measuring really big. There's a lot of different things that I'm not gonna go over in this video, but to me, the risk of those things was not worth it. I was really concerned about fractures or him getting stuck half out or me trying to push for hours and hours and hours and hours, exhausting myself, and then, you know, having to have a C-section anyways. It doesn't matter if you have a birth vaginally, if you have a C-section, all of it is just as special and wonderful as the next, and I don't want anything in the comments shaming somebody for their decision, shaming me for my decision, or anybody else for their decision. You have to decide the thing that is best for you, go with your gut, and do what you feel is right. I made the decision to go ahead and have a scheduled C-section because I was worried that the risk wasn't worth it. So I scheduled one. This was not pushed. I just want to say that because I've seen some people be like, oh, don't do that because they really push C-sections because they want it to be scheduled. It was not pushed on me whatsoever. It was something that I felt was the best thing to do. I didn't want my son's birth to be a traumatic experience for me or for him. It wasn't something that I had thought was gonna happen, that I had planned for, prepared for, nothing. I was really scared. I've never had a surgery in my entire life. I was terrified. And I'm gonna do an entire video about C-sections because I didn't know all the things. Like for instance, I heard the first shower is amazing. My first shower was horrible. And literally, I think about my first shower after a C-section, and that alone makes me reconsider if I want to have a second kid because I don't know if I could ever do that first C-section shower ever again. It was terrible. I hurt so bad. There will be a C-section video that's just my experience with having a C-section, which I have never had a natural birth, so I don't know how that would go, but oh God, it was painful. Not the actual surgery, but the after was I have trauma just thinking about that. But it ends, okay? I don't want to scare anybody. If you're planning on having a C-section, you're gonna be fine. Whenever I was in the process of the C-section, I will tell you guys what I did feel in my C-section video, but it was a blur. I was exhausted. I slept less than 2 hours the night before because I was so excited and nervous that I couldn't sleep. During the process of it, I felt high. Whenever they showed me him for the first time, I barely remember it. Like, I remember seeing a blurry, bluish pink baby, which was my son. My husband was sitting right next to me. He was so nervous, like his leg was bouncing up and down. He was so worried about me because I was being cut open right there and he's having his first son, and it was like this whole thing. And when he was born, he immediately cried. He was 9 pounds, 8 ounces. He was a chunky baby, but so freaking cute, you guys. That first day was honestly amazing. I had no pain because I was on drugs, and I had my baby, and he was born perfectly healthy. There was nothing wrong with him. He's waking up right now. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to finish this video. Let's see if I can be one of those 10 out of 10 moms here. I'm gonna try and continue telling you guys this while I'm feeding my son, so if you hear any funny noises, it's him eating. The first day with him was a blur. I was drugged out. I got to spend the first day with him and there were no complications. There was nothing wrong with him. He was immediately given to us. He was breathing fine. He was acting like a new baby, like the way that a newborn should act. My parents came to the hospital and they were the only ones that got to come because the next day when we were gonna have my brother-in-law visit, that's when everything went wrong. I don't even know if it was a full 24 hours later. I guess it was a little over 24 hours after he was born. Well, first of all, let me tell you what I think happened. I was learning how to breastfeed. I've heard like a wide array of stories from women who, you know, struggled with breastfeeding, and I was fully prepared for that to be me, but my son came out 9 pounds, 8 ounces, hungry and ready to latch. Like, we never had any problems. The first night, every time I tried to take him off my boob, he would cry. So I just let him sit on it as long as he wanted, and Mark had fallen asleep, my husband, and so it was just me sitting up in the hospital bed literally all night with my son like hanging off my boob, because every time I take him off he'd cry, and I was like, I don't know what else to do. I guess I'll leave him on it, even though he's not really eating. But if he wants to sit there and chew on my nipple all night, like, that's fine. A nurse ended up coming in and she was like, I think he's using you as a pacifier and you really need to get some sleep and he really needs to get some sleep. This is where I think everything went wrong, but I will just never know. She wrapped him in 2 swaddle blankets, which I didn't realize at the time. Like, I should have been like, no, don't do that, and put a bunch of blankets around him so that he would feel like he was still with me. Like, I think that's why she did that. And she gave him a pacifier so that I could get some sleep. I wake up hours later with this other nurse coming in to take my temperature and to take his temperature. When she took his temperature, he had a 100.5 fever. And I told her, I said, one of the nurses last night had wrapped him in all those blankets, so I think he just got too hot. But because he had a temperature, they had to report it. That's when everything went wrong. A fever is apparently really rare in new babies, so they were extremely concerned, which I totally understand. So they ended up coming in and taking our son out of the room. This is where everything got really hard. They ended up admitting our son into the NICU because he had to be given antibiotics that would last for 5 days, that he needed to be monitored, and it needed to be given to him through an IV. Our son never got wheeled back in the room that day. Like, as soon as they took him out to check him and try and figure out why he had a fever, he never came back in. As soon as they said they needed to admit him to the NICU, I know what the NICU is. The NICU is the place that you're thankful for, because without it, there'd be so many babies that didn't make it. But it's the one place that you don't want to hear that your baby's being taken to, because you know what that means. And initially, we were told as if it's not a big deal, he just needs to be in there for the antibiotics so that we can just double check that it wasn't just that he was too hot. So it was told to us like it wasn't, you know, it shouldn't be that scary, but I was trying to explain to them that, like, I know that there's other babies that get admitted to the NICU for far worse situations, but you're taking my new baby away from me and telling me I can't have him morning, noon, and night. you're taking him away from me. It doesn't matter if it's that he's not in there for, you know, one of the situations that unfortunately another little baby is in there for. It's that you're taking my baby away from me. You're telling me that he's sick and you're taking him away. He never came back in the room. I thought he was leaving and gonna come right. They told us he was gonna be right back in there, but he never came back. The next time that we saw him was when I was wheeled into his room in the NICU. When I got wheeled in there by my husband, our baby was laying there hooked up to all these monitors and wires all over him and an IV in his head. All of our first pictures of him are in the NICU with IVs and wires, and by that night, they discovered that he wasn't breathing very well. They put an oxygen tube into his nose. So then it went from all of the wires and the IV in his head to now an oxygen in his nose. And the reason why the IV was in his head was because they couldn't get a vein anywhere else. So he had been poked all over the place. They had tried to give him 3 spinals to get fluid out of his spinal, but because they had taken him from me and I wasn't able to feed him, he was dehydrated. And I'm like, what's going on? Like, nobody was telling us what was wrong. By the time we had got in there, his fever had went down, by the way, so I was convinced it was because the blankets that nurse put on him. But then on top of that, now you're telling me he needs oxygen because he's not breathing as well on his own. We were right down the hallway at first, and it was still really hard. Like, all I did was cry the whole time. And I was obviously in a lot of pain too, so it was really hard to get in and out of the NICU with the C-section. And then I'm trying to breastfeed my son, and it's complicated because he's got a oxygen tube in his nose and wires everywhere, and every time I'm trying to feed him, like, a wire's popping off and they're coming in to make sure that he's alive, and I'm like, I'm just trying to feed my son. And then I wanted to exclusively breastfeed, but because I wasn't able to be in there with him 24/7, they wanted to formula feed him. And then by the time my milk came in, I have strangers feeding my son all night while I'm not there. We ended up getting discharged and he didn't. That was the hardest drive home. That was the hardest drive home from anywhere I've ever had in my life. I have never wailed like while I was crying, ever. I've never felt more empty in my life. I really enjoyed being pregnant. I loved feeling his kicks and his movements. I enjoyed being pregnant. Like, he was really heavy at the end. I was really big and very uncomfortable at the end. It got really hard at the end, but overall I really liked being pregnant. It went from, you know, having my son there. I think the hardest thing was that I felt so connected to him. And then whenever he was taken, and we were told to go home without him, it felt like my husband and I made the decision to have this baby, and I've been carrying him this whole time. He's been with me this whole time, and now he's with a bunch of strangers feeding him my breast milk, and I'm going home without him and empty. That emptiness I cannot describe, because it wasn't just an emotional emptiness. It was feeling that he wasn't there anymore. So we went as much as we could and stayed as long as we could, and everybody kept telling us, get some sleep, because when he's home you're not gonna be able to sleep. And like, I'm like, I want to sleep in here on this freaking hard couch. I don't want to leave him. Like, I remember there was this one night where we were about to leave and he was in his little NICU bassinet thing, and he was just like zoning out towards the baby or the monitor thing that had like his like heart rate and oxygen and stuff being monitored on it. And he was just like staring at it into space, and I was like, I can't leave him here because he's awake. And he's just staring at the monitor. It was really hard to come home without him. Things like, you know, pumping milk and taking it in cooler bags so that other people can feed him other than you. People you just met or don't even know at all. Oh my God, it was hard. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to go through my entire life. There were a lot of details that I can't talk about because I'm crying a lot more than I thought that I would. I knew I was gonna cry, but like, this is really hard. There was a lot of details. The amount of sympathy I have towards moms that have babies and parents, not just moms, but parents that have babies in the NICU, like, how you NICU parents, like, My heart goes out to you guys, because that is rough. Because he was on oxygen, I have a lot of anxiety with that now. I mean, he's been home for a month and I obsessively make sure he's breathing. Like, I can't sleep at night because I have to make sure he's breathing constantly. It's bad, and I am gonna talk to my doctor about it for sure, because I have anxiety normally, but I have a lot of trauma from the NICU experience and from him having a breathing tube in his nose and him being taken from me, that I'm very attached to him. I'm with him 24/7 and I'm constantly making sure that he's breathing. We have to take him in to get his heart looked at. They said that he has a slightly enlarged aorta, and we don't really know why yet, but he's going back in 6 months to get that looked at to see if it's still large or what's going on with that, but they're not really concerned about it right now. But apart from that, he's healthy. When I sat down to do this video, I thought I was gonna give all the little details, and honestly guys, I'm just gonna cry the whole time. But I know a lot of people wanted to know how my birth went, and I just wanted to get this video out there for you guys. I had a scheduled C-section because he was big. He came out 9 pounds 8 ounces and he was very chunky. We had him for a day before he was taken from us and put into the NICU. I still am dealing with the trauma from that. I was telling my husband the other day, I was like, it sucks because all of his brand new photos in the hospital are photos I can't even look at, because it just takes me back there and it's really traumatic. Maybe I'll talk about a more detailed version, like what all the things that were going on, because there was a lot. I'll do that in another video, because there was a lot of nurses I didn't like and there were some nurses that I did. But if you guys want that video, give it a thumbs up and I'll definitely do that for you guys. But I'm gonna go and get off this floor because I'm hunched over like a golem and my back hurts. Ow! There we go, I popped it. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll be seeing you guys soon for another video.